Welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast, the show where we talk with real educators and hear their powerful impact. Their stories will grab you, inspire you, and show you the reach of the work we do. And now, the Bratzman Group presents your hosts, Josh Gauthier and Mandy Taylor.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast. We're excited to bring you great stories from the field every week from just regular teachers. I'd like to introduce the group we have tonight to discuss our first story. First, I want to bring on Jason Bretzmann. Jason, how you doing tonight?
Very good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Made it through another week. I can't believe we're already 7 weeks into the school year as of the recording. It just seems to fly faster and faster every year.
Well, I'm sure you're doing great work every single day. I think you want me to introduce myself?
That would be wonderful so people know who you are.
Oh, all right. I'm Jason Bretzmann. I am a teacher and also an innovation integrator. I've been speaking in a bunch of different places and helped write a couple of books, including Personalized PD, Flipping Your Professional Development. So we're having fun sharing and thinking and engaging with students and with teachers around the country.
Good stuff, Jason. And I think for me, the best part about all of that is everything that you've done is all coming from somebody who is 100% in the classroom every day, teaching kids just like the hundreds of thousands of teachers in America, which of course I know as a teacher myself, that always just adds some weight to anything that you bring to the table. So I always enjoy hearing the things that you have to share. So thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
And we'll bring on our other panelists tonight, who will also be the first person who gets to share their story. Mandy, how are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you so much. My name is Mandy Taylor. This is my 20th year in education. I was in the classroom for 17 years as a kinder, first, second, and third grade teacher. And then the last 3 years I am working as an instructional coach at an elementary school in Texas. And then I'm also the co-director of the Central Texas Writing Project based out of Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. I work with the Writing Project every June for the last 3 years. So I really get to work with teachers and really try to help empower them to find their teacher voice is kind of my passion right now. That's
so cool. And it's probably a story for a different time, but I'd love to hear more about that writing project. I know with November right around the corner, depending on when you hear this podcast, it might be right now, we've got NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, coming up, which I've done the past 3 years. I'm going to try and do it for a fourth year. And I'm very excited about that and writing related to not just teaching, but, personal passion, fiction, etc. So it'll be interesting to hear more about that. But we could talk about that in the future. Tonight, I think we've got a slightly different bend to go towards. So every week, we're going to just try and share just a story from the field to hopefully inspire you and let you know that everything that you do matters in the classroom for one kid, for one adult, for one family, for your community. The things that we do every day have such incredible impact, and we really want to highlight those. I'm Josh. I am a teacher in Wisconsin, and I'm excited to be a part of this podcast. But this isn't about me. This is about the stories. And Mandy, we have you here tonight because you have a really good story that I think sets the tone for this podcast about, as I mentioned, how impactful a teacher can be. So for our listeners, why don't you set the stage a little bit of where your story starts? What got you really thinking about how important the teachers can be in a classroom?
Well, I think as an elementary teacher, I've always really seen it, firsthand. But now that I have my own children in this game, it's a little bit more personal and more real to me. And I've had really great relationships with kids that I've taught and with families that I've been able to kind of be part of their kids' journey all along the way. And we joke around in our district kind of like that teachers are like local celebrities. You know, you can't go to the grocery store, to a soccer game, to anywhere without being, you know, recognized, stalked a little bit, kind of, you know, and at the elementary level, it's a huge thrill for the kids when they see you outside of the building. And I think where I am now is just kind of, I think teachers have it rough when when they parent kids that are in their schools, in their district, around and about, because it's hard to separate your work as a parent from your work as an educator. And so I feel sorry for teacher kids sometimes because they have a different experience than just a kiddo that, you know, is being parented by someone that doesn't live this work each day. And so that's just kind of where I am. I've recently kind of understood the importance of educators. I mean, I've always known, don't get me wrong, but having the, what my kids say, you know, and them kind of reflecting on what they do in school and knowing what they know outside of school has been very, very interesting for me as a parent. So that's kind of where we started. And I said, I have a story that I want to tell, but that's just kind of where it began.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that teachers are like local celebrities in a way, and it often is an interesting, like, weird amount of pressure when you're out in public, always thinking about how you're presenting yourself, how you look, the things that you're doing when you're out and about in the community, because really, I mean, you've got potentially hundreds of kids that know who you are and look up to you, and it really is kind of an interesting role that, you know, we normally only think like the big time celebrities are the only people look up to, but weird.
And I'll tell you what, it's not just local. When I was on my honeymoon in Hawaii, one of my former students from Wisconsin called our hotel room and said, "Hey, I'm stationed here. We should meet up for dinner." So on the honeymoon, he had to, it was a while ago, so he had to buy a disposable camera so that we could take pictures on the way. But my wife won't let me forget about that one. So they're everywhere, and they still want to, you know, get together with us.
That's a great story. We're gonna have to add that one to the list of stories that we'll tell. I'm intrigued now. So going back to you, man, you really mentioned about how this really hit home to you when you had children of your own. And as somebody who doesn't have children, you know, I have heard that from teachers in the past that I'd understand things differently if I have kids of my own. Completely different situation I don't want to get into right now, but can you share with us perhaps one instance of when something involving your child, whether it was a class that he was in or she was in, that they really liked or didn't like, and how that affected them, or how that maybe changed when they got a different teacher? Just if you could give us like one really good example of what you've discovered so far in parenthood.
Well, and what I know about kids too is sometimes their reality isn't actual reality. You know, I mean, that I used to tell parents in conferences, like, I'll believe half of what they say happens at home if you'll believe half of what they say happens at school. Because, you know, kids come to school and share the most, you know, interesting things. And then when I ask the parents, they're like, well, that's not exactly how it went down. And it's the same thing, you know, vice versa. But I have my son what I've noticed about him as an individual is that he will generalize his love for an entire content area with his love for a teacher. And I didn't really get that, but and I've kind of changed the names, of the, you know, I mean, I'm not here to, put anybody down. Teaching is such hard work, and I know that, and I know that I can only imagine that he's very, very difficult to teach, because I know the unique challenges of parenting him. But this is a kid who has always been fascinated with science and has loved reading scientific books and just fascinated with the world, and, goes through these stages of space and And, just we never really know. We'll hear an entire the entire explanation of the excretory system, or let me tell you what happened here, and so much more information than I ever care to know about things he's learning and things that are important to him. But he came home one year and was just adamant, and he's like, I hate science. I hate science. And I was like, oh, like, what did science ever do to you? Like, tell me more about what, this broad thing. And so he's talking about the situation, and it was, some unfortunate events that happened in the course of a class. And, actually was one of the first, like, kind of uncomfortable parent conferences that I ended up having to have. And because my thing is, I'm always going to default on the side of the school because I am an educator. And so I think sometimes to the detriment of my own kid, I'm trying to just reinforce to Education America that I value teachers and I'm behind the schools and, that kind of thing. And so for a long, long time, I just kept kind of denying this feeling that he was having about hating science and everything. And I was like, did something happen? Did something change? And what I really was able to finally nail it down to is that there was an uncomfortable situation going on in a classroom that was certainly not harmful, but not making him feel like it wasn't the optimal learning environment. And so we worked through it, and we talked about how, when these things happen, this is how you react, and that, I met with the teacher, and we found out ways that he could do better at his part of the work, and, of just navigating, it was the very last period of the day. It was all of these things that just kind of was a bunch of different factors put all together. But what's so fascinating to me, and what I was really trying to get at, is the importance of a teacher is the very next year he came home and he's like, I love science. And I was like, what? Oh, now we're back. Like, now the planets are back and we love systems again. And, I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, Mom, you would just love this. Like, we get to have conversations about science. We get to talk about vocabulary, and, all of the sudden he's like, just celebrating this entire content area. And so the work that I've had to do with him as far as parenting, because it's not just science, it's not just social studies, but to him it's shaping his views of the world. And the books that he reads, he wants to process through. The things he learns, I mean, we don't even know what he's going to choose to do as a career. But when he comes home each night and has these conversations about content, that's helping him. That's when I knew that I wanted to be a teacher, is when I was in elementary school, and I started loving books, and I loved the way my teacher read the book, and I wanted to read the book to the kids. And that's, I knew that from such a young age. And so I think that kind of going through that experience with him, and how the sun rises and sets on how he feels in that room. And then, him maybe not, he's not able to attribute it to a teacher, but I can attribute it to an environment that a teacher designs, because ultimately I believe that's what teachers do, is they create an environment that either helps kids feel very secure and ready to learn, or and I don't think anything is intentional, but there are times when environments aren't as optimal for the kiddos that we have each day. And so I don't know, that's one of those things where I know I can every single year, I can tell, what teachers have reached him, who he talks about, what stories he tells, who he wants to go see when, he comes back to my elementary school. He wants to go touch base with teachers that he, had through school. And I see that power that those teachers have in the lives of my kids. And so those those are people that I want to celebrate. So I think as we continue hearing these stories, I'm so excited that we're going to highlight the power of educators, because I really think that they don't feel celebrated enough.
Absolutely. And obviously, thank you for sharing that story. I think that's so powerful that you have that discussion, you have that understanding to bring to the table when you're dealing with your own children. And just thinking, and I think for all of us as educators to reflect upon that learning environment and to think, if it was our kid in this classroom, would this be the place I'd want them to be? I think that's a really simple question to ask. I think it's a fair question to ask of ourselves, and to really be able to justify why we do the things we do for that environment. So thank you for bringing that up to us and kind of setting the tone. And we'll have plenty more stories from you as we move forward.
And let me just add to that. I get to help coach my son's soccer team. So he's a fifth grader. And so that means I get to drive a lot of the carpool with a couple of the kids. And sometimes I bring my second grader along. And as Mandy was talking about that, they talk about the environment, but the coin of the realm for them is nice. That's like the currency that the teacher, has for himself or herself. Who did you get next year? Who do you want to have next year? And why do you want to have them? And it always boils down to, oh, she's so nice. Oh, I heard he's nice. It's like, well, what do they do in class? What activities do they do? What kind of things do you remember from, the previous year that you heard people talk about? Oh, they just said she's so nice. And, I have asked the question 10 different ways, but it always comes back to, well, I just think they're nice. And, and for me, that's me processing what Mandy said. It's that culture, that feeling, that how kids perceive or the reality of what it is in that classroom that they're talking about, they're nice. And that's the one we want to be in, that kind of thing. I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, as we wrap up our first podcast, and something that we'll do each and every podcast, we want to bring in the Bratzman Group's personalized PD game of stories. So our whole entire podcast is predicated around telling stories, and these cards do a great job prompting those types of discussions among your colleagues or your friends and other educators. So each week we'll pull one. We'll do a little 1 minute tell about the prompt on the card to do a little bonus for the day. So the card that I have here, we're gonna do 1 minute. We're gonna try and speed through here. We know you got a busy life, so thank you for squeezing this in. So this card says propose to present. Tell a story about a proposal you submitted or a proposal that was accepted in your school or district or for a conference, or a rejected proposal, or a presentation you would like to propose, or the best proposal you have heard of. Please, no marriage proposals during the game, though. Sorry.
I'm okay with that.
So, Mandy, if you'd like to kick us off, do you have a little story about proposing to present?
I do. So it sounds a little bit contrived in this situation, but it really, really is not. I first played the game of stories actually a couple of months ago. And we played on the patio at a bar in our town, and a bunch of teachers showed up, and we had the very best time. And so this year I actually submitted a proposal to TCEA in Austin. It's our big tech conference, and we'll actually be presenting a short panel, and then we'll be playing Game of Stories and then running a back channel. So I did it a couple of weeks ago in Houston at TCCA, and it was kind of a smaller group in the room, but it was such fantastic sharing and things that, we had this group talking about early childhood stations, and this group over here was talking about virtual reality and Erasmus and doing all this cool stuff. And then, everybody was just adding ideas we just had a Google Doc that was going on. But I'm really excited to present it on a larger scale at TCEA this year. with Caleb Hudgens from Texas, with Jessica Torres from Waco. So I'm excited about getting to play that game and helping teachers be the champions and the stars of their own PD, because really that's just where it all goes down for me. Is, I hate when a teacher says, well, I'm just a teacher. And I'm like, you don't get that the power, of what you do and who you represent. So I'm excited about doing that at TCEA.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I think you broke a minute though, but we let it go because it's a good story.
It was just over, I think.
Jason, do you have your?
I need like a visual timer.
I'm sure Google has one. So this makes me think, because when I first started presenting, it was, it was very much, here's what I'm going to talk about. And then there were some times when I presented where I had more of a choose your own adventure, and I would use, some polling software to say, which of these do you want me to talk about first, and what do you want me to talk about second, and those kinds of things. But as I think about it now, I'm thinking about the presentations and the proposals I've submitted recently, and a lot of them are about the participants being actively involved and the participants running the show, and me as, the commentator, the facilitator, hey, let me add one more thing. So it might be a tech tool teach meet, which I was part of via video conferencing that we did in Northern Ireland, where people show up and they have, a small amount of time to prepare. They're chosen, and then they present on some topic for a minute or two, or the long ones I think are 3 or 4. So those kinds of things, and of course the cards are good. And now it's really about how the audience can get involved and how the audience can become the presentation, and we can all share our learning and share our thoughts and share the examples of the good things that we do, because we got to honor the professionals who are doing it every single day and have great things to share. And it's important that we ask them, because there's lots of good things all over the place.
Absolutely, Jason. Thank you for that.
59 seconds.
And you're fine. We're not so strict here. We're nice.
Yes. That's why I want to come back here every time.
So I guess I need to answer the question too. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to talk about ed camps, because you do kind of propose to present. It's not a drawn-out proposal. You just walk up and say, I want to talk about this. And for me, it's always those sessions at ed camp where the whole conversation is a discussion. It's not one person leading, which can happen sometimes because, it might be you've got somebody there who really knows a topic well, and everybody's there to learn about it. And that's great that you can get that at ed camps. But my favorite one, we proposed, I think we called it education karaoke or something like that. And
sure, why not?
And it was great. And I shared about like our cardboard event, which on Monday, October 23rd, we have our Hour of Cardboard event at my school. That went great. And so I was just thinking, like, that's not a tech thing. I really want to share about this, and I want to hear other people's stories too. And we spent like half the time talking about cardboard, which was awesome. And it was just great to hear people talk about what's happening in their schools. That's not necessarily technology, just, what good stuff is happening, what educational learning, cool events, innovative things are going on that kind of exist outside of that scope of technology where the slant always seems to want to go. So that's my story. I love ed camps, love sharing there. And I think that's a good thing I think everybody should get to at some point. So Jason, let me ask you a question. What do you think is the most powerful impact of an educator? What do you think is the true power of an educator?
Well, that's a good question. And as you're talking about sort of sometimes the absence of technology, I'm thinking about a recent story that our assistant principal told the entire staff about his daughter's principal, who he does a great impression of her, by the way. And she, I guess, has just retired, but she told him something to the effect of, I'm not really about the technology or other things. I just think that we got to love kids. And then he told this story in front of the whole staff, and he's a guy who jokes about, I think he's half serious that he has no emotions, but he jokes about how he has no emotions, and like the only thing worse than emotions is hugs for him. And, so he's a high school assistant principal, and so I get it. But so here he is in front of the staff talking about his own daughter, because he, a couple of years ago, moved. And so I believe it was, and he'll forgive me if I get some of the details a little bit askew, but I believe she was a third grader. And so she had her friends, she had her neighborhood, she had her best friends, and she had her school. And then they had to move. And that year, she missed about 25% of that third grade year because of the anxiety that came with that and, the other things associated with it. And, so to the point of, she couldn't go to school some days, and she didn't want to, and she couldn't sleep the night before because it was all so new and so different. And so somehow this principal found out about it, and these are educated parents and hardworking, and they read to their kids and all this kind of stuff. But this kid, his poor daughter, had so much anxiety, she just didn't want to be there. And so they had a situation where principal showed up at the front door each day and met his daughter at the front door. And they went in to her office, and she said, if you have any problem, any anxious situations, you can come to my office anytime you want during the day. And she said, if you need to call and check in with your parents, you can do that from my office. And then she went and ate lunch with her. So here's the principal meeting this girl at the door, giving her all the options and saying, and we're going to eat lunch together. And, principals have 1,000 things and, 100 emails and every fire to put out. And here was this principal knowing that this kid needed somebody else, had a great teacher, had great parents, but she needed one more person. And so the way he tells the story, and I tell you what, he does have some emotion when he tells it. Good for him. He said this year she's missed one day. One day. So that's the impact, Josh. That's the impact of an educator. One more person to be on that kid's side, one more person to say, let's just go love kids and help them get ahead. I think that's the power. That's what we do. That's what we get to do for a living.
I've got nothing to top that. I think that's beautiful and a great way to end. Jason, Mandy, thank you for joining us. I'm excited to continue this podcast with you, and really excited to see the other educators we bring on board and get to hear their great stories and have these awesome conversations about the impact of an educator and their unique funny stories and their soppy stories and everything in between. So I'm excited to start this journey with both of you, and it'll be interesting to see where we go. So
thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anytime. Excited to be a part of this, and I'm excited to see where we go next. So thanks for listening. We appreciate it, and we look forward to catching you on episode 2. Good night.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stories in EDU podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks again.